Hi, this is Joe Chambers. Welcome to Musicians Hall of Fame Backstage The Vault Series. Today is part one of a two-part interview we shot back in 2008 at Muscle Shoals Sound with the phenomenal Swampers. Hope you enjoy it. If you do, be sure to hit like, subscribe, the notification bell so you don't miss any of our new content. Again, the Swampers. So, if you would, tell the story again of how y'all acquired this and what your deal was here at Muscle Shoals Sound.
Actually, we
It was already recorded.
it was already here.
But you spotted the building, though. I mean,
Yeah.
even before that.
Even before a guy by the name of Fred Beavis put in a little country studio here, 4-track, and he and I were talking one day, and I said, he said, "Where would you put this studio?" And I said, "Well, I happen to know a building that looks like Fame." Fame was a real narrow building back then. And
with gravel on
yeah,
the parking lot.
and it just resembled a studio. And so I came by here and I showed it to Fred, and Fred went and rented it. He had leased it from the doctor that we had to finally lease from. And Fred stayed here about 3 years or 4,
I guess,
maybe.
yeah.
And
Seemed like a long time then.
forever almost. And then his wife decided she didn't want him doing that. And Fred had been a song leader at a church, and he was into music, had cut a record himself. And so he had asked for a meeting with me and Roger and he said, "I've been kind of looking at everybody in town." He said, "I think you two guys could pull this off." And we're like, "What?" We didn't know what was going on. And he said, "I want to sell you this studio."
He would come over, I would come over here and do country demos with him. And every time I would come over here to play a demo, he was doing country music and hard to compete with Nashville, Tennessee. And but anyway, he was doing country demos. Every time I would come over here, he would say, he'd put his hand on my shoulder and says, "Roger, you guys should buy this studio from me." He said, "Y'all would do real good. You would just do real good." Every time I would come over here, he would say that.
Well, now I heard it was like Jerry Wexler was really who was instrumental in telling you guys to buy your or have your own studio.
No, Jared never brought it up.
I called Jimmy one night and said, "Jimmy, let's buy that studio." He said, "What?" I said, "Yeah, let's buy Fred's studio." And Jimmy and I had built studios in our mind several times. We were fans of recording studios. And so when we started getting to work with Jerry, and we started getting pretty well established, what Fred had said to me kind of come together in my head. And so I called Jimmy one night on the phone. We stayed on the phone for
8 hours.
8 hours figuring out how we were going to acquire the studio. And
That was back when you had the phones on the wall in the house, one phone. Remember that?
So how did you make the transformation from the board that was in here to what you ended up with?
Well, we got to backtrack a little bit. The first thing we did, what happened, Rick Hall was in the process of doing a record deal for Fame with Capitol Records. And Carl Engelman was the vice president or president of the label. And they put together a whole package where Rick Hall would hire us on a full-time basis. In other words, before this, we worked 3 weeks of the month with outside people. I mean, lots of different labels. And Rick Hall was going to use us. I mean, at that time, he was using us 1 week out of the month. And so
he wanted us to sign an exclusive arrangement with him where we would just play for him only. Which could have worked out good for him, but
Not for us.
for what he was offering, we were already making more
double
freelancing and everything than what he was
willing to pay us.
offering to pay us. And we wanted to do it, but he wouldn't pay us enough. So that's when we started looking for other places, because we thought we might be frozen out or started up and then gotten kicked out. We didn't know what would. I mean, I don't know if you. But we didn't know what would happen, so we just wanted to try to make.
And plus, we always wanted to have a studio on our own, and so it kind of tied together. And So by the end of that 8-hour talk on a Sunday afternoon, we committed to each other that we would start pursuing doing what it took to buy Fred's studio.
Then we had gone to, Jimmy and I flew to New York. By this time we were working with Jerry Wexler, and we knew that we had to have better equipment. And we had to have an 8-track?
That 8-track, we only had a 4.
We had a 4-track, and so we knew that to get their business that we'd have to have an 8-track. And so we kind of touched on it with Jerry, and then he said, yeah, I'll be glad to loan you the money for the 8-track. And
But he never asked us to do that.
no,
We told him what we wanted to do, but there was a lot of scuttlebutt going around that Jerry talked us into doing it. Never happened.
No.
Never happened.
So it's pretty wild that you guys were able to bring in the kind of talent to Muscle Shoals, Alabama, that you did. I mean, how did you get to know all the artists, Paul Simon and?
But that came years later. It's almost like
It really all
grew.
started with Jerry, because Jerry put his stamp of approval on us, and he knew Jan Winter at Rolling Stone, and just about anything Jerry said or quoted, he could get it in print, and he had bragged on the Muscle Shoals musicians, and he would make sure to get that out, and that helped us.
And there was one record that made it all possible, was When a Man Loves a Woman, that was cut at Quinn Ivy's.
Neither here nor at Fame.
But it wasn't
Either
cut
one.
at Fame or here. And but just the fact geographically it was cut here, that for years many people thought it was cut at Fame, but in fact it was Quinn Ivy's studio, Quinby.
Here in Sheffield, or
It was
Yes.
in
In
Sheffield,
Sheffield.
downtown.
Another little building, kind of
Like
like
this.
this.
and the musicians on it.
It was in '66 we cut
See,
it.
that was Marlon, wasn't it? And
Marlon
Spooner.
who produced it too, and Spooner and
Junior.
Junior Lowe and Roger and Percy. It was three musicians
Then the horn
and
guys, yeah.
three musicians and them, and Percy. We got the lead. We got the vocal with the track, which was not easy.
Being the drum, we had no headphones.
Right.
Matter of fact, there was a kerosene heater out in the middle of the floor to keep us warm. That's what the heat was. There were no headphones, and sitting there playing the drums, it was just a little booth. It wasn't padded. The only thing I could hear was just the bass bouncing off the wall, hitting me late. So I just had to sit there and hum the song to myself and just play what was in my mind, and that's how we got to do that. And we had done it like that before too, because the object was you learn the song, get it in your body and in your mind as much as you can, sit there and play it alone because you can't hear anyone else, and then listen to the playback to see where you were. That's how you would judge just if you were tired or not.
What was your affiliation with the Stones at all? Did you have any affiliation with them when they came here to record?
All through Jerry Wexler and Ahmed Erdogan.
That's how that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, when Ahmed was signing them, it's when he brought them down here.
They Atlantic distributed their label, and the negotiations for that happened during the Brown Sugar session over Old Holiday Inn. While same 3 days, they had their lawyers and Atlantic had their lawyers meeting, and Jerry was here for that too, and Ahmed was producing it, or not producing it, but he was in charge of, he got them here.
That had to put a surge on Muscle Shoals too. The fact that the Stones came here and recorded, I would expect.
Nobody really,
Nobody knew they came.
and a lot of
They told us not
many
to tell.
people recognized.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a secret.
I mean,
were
after
kinda-
the fact.
They were kind of bugged that nobody knew them.
Even after the fact, it wasn't a big row about it. I mean,
They asked us not to tell anyone, and we didn't.
there
We
was no studio credits or anything, so.
So nobody's beating the door down.
Yeah, I mean, just because that happened.
But we were busy.
nothing,
We
really.
Yeah.
were staying busy with the different artists that Atlantic
The
was
3
bringing.
days they recorded, I was playing with our section with R.B. Greaves, who had done the hit Take a Letter Maria, and we were doing the album, and Amit produced that. And that was the first time Amit had ever worked with us. Had brought a band, because Jerry was the one that we always worked with. And but when it all happened, the R.B. Greaves 3 days and the Stones 3 days, we started at 10 in the morning with R.B., and then we'd start at 6 at night with the Stones. And then I worked with the Stones as an engineer, by luck. Jimmy Miller, their producer engineer, didn't show, and so
You did.
I was there.
So, how did now Paul Simon sessions? They were here in the old Muscle Shoals Sound that we're
In
in.
this room.
In this room.
And what all songs did you guys do with them?
Well, he came to record Take Me to the Mardi Gras. He called and told Jimmy that he wanted
One song.
Manager called and said they wanted to record one song, and they had heard I'll Take You There by the Staples Singers, and they wanted a Jamaican band to play on this Take Me to the Mardi Gras. And they talked to Al Bell, and Al Bell said it wasn't a Jamaican band, it was these guys in Alabama. And they called and talked to Jimmy, and Jimmy worked the deal up. But we got the song, I think, on the second take, and so we had all this time.
We had 4 days to do one song. That's the way he kind of worked. And but we wasn't used to doing it that way. We was used to cutting a song every 2 or 3 hours. And so after 2 hours, he's standing up here looking at the voice of the theater speakers, hearing the playback of Take Me to the Mardi Gras, saying, "That's it, that's it." And he couldn't believe it, because he definitely wasn't going to leave then, because he had to pay for 3 more days. And so he just sat here on the floor right in here, and he said, "Y'all gather around," and said, "If y'all hear something y'all want to record, just pick it out." And so he started
We'll record
playing.
whatever you like,
Well, yeah.
whatever song you want to
We
record.
became
will.
his co-producer. And we did, he remember he played One Man's Ceilings, Another Man's Floor, Kodachrome, and we was just picking them, boy, as
So
they
we
came
like
up.
that Kodachrome one. Let's do that.
And
Kodachrome.
so then we started cutting them, and he wound up staying the whole time, and we cut over 2/3 of the album. Come to cut one, and kind of tickled us.
And he came back to do Loves Me Like a Rock. He had already recorded the track in New York with some New York musicians.
Jamaica first.
What's that?
Jamaica first.
Jamaica first,
And then New York, and then the West Coast.
And
There was only a guitar on it, though.
and
The singers-
he brought the track here with just his guitar on it.
And they had the Dixie Hummingbirds
And
singing
we
with him,
overdubbed the bass and drums and
and guitar.
guitar.
How did y'all get hooked up with Bob Seger?
Oh, that's it. Yeah, they had a little misunderstanding on
the
payment.
misunderstanding is what's funny. That's
Yeah.
funny.
When they negotiated doing it, Punch was thinking that one side was one, the
whole side of the
of an
album.
album, 6
And
songs.
back then we called sides a song.
Song. So
How many sides you gonna do? Well, we're gonna do 12 sides. So that's an album.
So that's
But
12.
Punch didn't know, and he thought that one side was one
Times
side of
two.
an album was one side.
And so they finally settled that, and then, of course, they were all a little ruffled about it, and so old Punch came up to us as they were packing up, and he said, "By the way," he said, "Bob really liked working with you guys. Said, would y'all work with him on a co-production thing in the future?" And we said, "Well, sure." And we never had really a very superficial paper, but it was
It was pretty much of a handshake
deal.
agreement.
And
Nothing ever
you
followed.
wouldn't believe. The payment has been. We just got one again. It's still paying.
On a handshake deal.
Every 6 months.
Punch Andrews
The
and
royalties
Bob Seger
keep coming.
honored their agreement.
Unbelievable.
Their gentleman's agreement. They've honored it all through these years.
That's a rare thing,
And they put you on the album. They gave you credit on the album.
Yeah,
too.
co-production.
Yeah.
That,
Co-production.
that was something that a lot of people didn't do, right?
Well, see, they never had a hit before Catman Do. and we did the first hit.
Well, actually, but by that time, the musicians' credits were going to albums. And that's, I think, Jerry Wexler made
He did
sure
that.
that he was one of the first producers
To do that.
we ever worked with to make sure that the players were listed.
Recognized. For the first few years, we did all the record. And then by year, I guess it's 4 or 5, Silver Bullet Band really wanted to play on the record. And so he started splitting the record, 50% with us and them. And that's kind of what happened. So they cut some of the really great records.
They cut Night Moves.
They cut Night Moves.
Yeah. And
They did swell. They did fine.
they really did. But we were just thrilled. We worked 10 years totally with him, which is unheard of.
Well, that's honorable and smart, because Garth, did the same thing with Demo to a month or two
And
ago.
Alan Reynolds, too.
Alan Reynolds, right. But, so David, you started out on trombone, didn't you?
Well, yes. I actually started on piano, but I lasted about 6 months playing the piano.
That long?
Yeah, but I
Longer than I lasted.
I played trombone in a high school band, and when I was trying to get my foot in the door at Fame and Quinn Ivy's studio, I would play bass or trombone or whatever, just to be on the session. And
I'm Your Puppet.
I was fortunate enough to play on a couple of hit records with the trombone. I'm Your Puppet and I Never Loved a Man with Aretha. And that helped. That helped me get my foot in the door. I thought, well, if he can play trombone, maybe he can play bass.
Did you have formal lessons on either?
I don't know if you'd call them formal, but I took trombone lessons from Mr. Gooch, my band director in high school. No lessons on the bass. Just listened to records and watched Jimmy Croney and a few other people play.
Do you use fingers or pick or both?
I started out playing with pick, and we were recording Percy, and Quinn or Marlon One came into the studio and said, well, I was in Memphis and saw Duck Dunn playing, and he plays with his fingers. And I said, really? And so I, on that session, started trying to play with my fingers. And I can't play with a pick now. I can't hold it.
And to Tommy Cogbill you observed, didn't you?
Oh yeah, but
Playing
that was
with
after that. Yeah, Tommy Cogbill is my hero, was and still is.
Osborne plays with a pick.
Right,
And that's it.
And he's a master.
And Roger, did you start out as a drummer, or did you start out on another instrument?
My first instrument was piano for a while, and that wasn't working out for me. I didn't care for the piano teacher, and the piano teacher didn't care for me. And but one thing, she did bring a little toy set of drums to the class one day, and with the bass drum, she was hitting downbeats, the 1, 2, 3, 4, teaching us where 1 and 3. And I thought, well, I can do that. I can do that. But I had been interested in the drums even before. But I didn't have any sticks or anything. But after I quit the piano lessons, I saved up some money and bought some drumsticks and had those drumsticks for a while. And then saved up some more money and bought some brushes.
You start playing in church.
Well, yeah, that's right. First time I ever played drums was in the church with my aunt and uncle in Mishawaka, Indiana. They went to a Pentecost church, and so I got permeated with the church groove. And then one night they let me play drums. I had been going around with them at tent meetings to play tambourine, and they let me play drums one night, and it seemed pretty natural, for the drums. So.
What was your first kit?
First hit?
Kit.
Hearing aids.
Speech.
It was a small Slingerland kit, bass drum and a snare drum and a bass drum mounted cymbal holder with a cymbal about this big with 4 rivets in it. That was my first kit.
Did you have a drummer that, like David talked about bass players, did you have a drummer that you really looked up to and learned from?
Well, at the time, it was mostly just records, and I think that was when I got my drums, Jimmy. I think it was before I met Mike Shepard and Jerry Kerrigan, and I really didn't meet any local drummers till a little while later. That a fella and I did a talent contest, which we lost, but there was some other players there, and that's where I met Mike Shepard. He's a great drummer. He was a drum instructor for Navy for 20 years.
Academy.
And I think I didn't meet Jerry Kerrigan that day, but sometime around that I met Jerry. But that day that did the talent contest, there's a band came on stage, and a guy with his hair slicked back with a white coat on, singing like Elvis, and they had a guitar player and a piano player. That was the rock and roll band, a singer, a piano player, and a guitar player. And so I thought, well, maybe these guys maybe they'd like to have a drummer. And I think I was about 12 years old at the time. And so the piano player, after they got finished, he was leaning up against the wall, having a cigarette. And so I walked up to him and I said, by the way, do you think that you guys might like to have a drummer? And it was Spooner Oldham. And he says, well, maybe so. I'll talk to the guys, and this is on Saturday, and I'll talk to the guys, and we'll call you Monday or Tuesday and let you know. And so that Monday, he called and he said, well, the guys they said that they'd kind of like to have a drummer. And so that's really the first band I ever played in was with Spooner Oldham.
Not a bad start.
No.
No, it wasn't a bad start. We were just all kids.
What was the first money that any of you guys got paid as a musician?
$10 for me at the National Guard Armory that had a square dance.
Me too. I did the same thing. $10 on a Saturday night. That's what.
First time I made any money was in Tennessee at Collinwood High School, and there was a little show that my dad helped Spooner and I, and Spooner's cousin and the singer, and he kind of promoted this little show, and so we went up to play it around lunchtime for all the kids who wanted to pay the quarter to get in and see the rock and roll musicians. And I remember we made $9, and
A piece?
yeah,
That's pretty good.
$9 a piece, and
That's a lot of quarters.
I thought, well, that's pretty good. We did pretty good there, $9. But it was downhill all the way after that for a long time. I've played, and I'm sure we all have played for nothing, and been promised money, but ended up still playing for nothing. I think the lowest amount of money that I've ever made, without making nothing, which I've done a lot, the lowest I ever made was 31 cents. And that was splitting the door in one of those nightclubs. Oh, we're going to be rich. We split the door. All the money's ours. There was like 3 people there. And we were counting it out. It was 31 cents a piece.
Jimmy, what was your first instrument?
Actually, I played in the band, David, in the school band. I played cornet, and for 2 years in junior high school. We read music the whole bit. Taught by the band director. And by the time I got in the 9th grade, I decided I got inspired to play guitar. I heard Chuck Berry play Johnny B. Good on the radio. And then I went to see a local band that played that song, and I was hooked. I was totally hooked. And we had a band here that started out in the 50s, and just about all the musicians from this area were drawn to them. It was Hollis Dixon and the keynotes, and the guitar player was Donnie Shrigley, and he became my hero. And, and it was amazing. They were playing not only high school stuff, they were playing sorority and fraternity at Alabama, Auburn, Mississippi, everywhere. And so that was one of the inspirations right there, seeing Donnie Shrigley play a Stratocaster, which blew my mind. And I said when I left there, I've got to learn how to do this.
And what was your first guitar?
Huh?
Your first guitar?
Okay, was a Stratotone, Sears and Roebuck. It was a Stratotone. It was a harmony guitar. Had one pickup and no treble almost at all on it. And I played that for a year or so. And then I got me a single. You remember the little 3/4 neck Fender?
Music Master?
Music Master. I got one of those. It was a lot better. And then I went from there to Stratocaster. And now I'm at Telecaster.
And David, what was your first bass?
Well, the bass, first time I played a bass, I borrowed one from a bass player in the band that Jimmy played with. His name was Jimmy Croney, and he just passed away just in the last day.
Didn't know that.
And he was good enough to let me take the bass home one night, and I learned how to play Walk Don't Run and a few other things on that bass. And after I played that bass, I said, well, I'm going to play the bass. And I saved up my money and had a friend who could order instruments from Fender, and so I bought a Fender Jazz bass in 1961.
You still have it?
I know I don't. It got stolen. But great bass. It was on a lot of hit records until it did get stolen. It got stolen in 1973 while we were playing with Traffic.
But it was for years. I mean, how long was it? You had the bass, but you had no amp.
Oh, I had no amp for probably over a year. I had the bass, but no amp, and it's kind of hard to play electric bass without an amp. But I would borrow an amp or whatever until I could finally buy one. My parents weren't very supportive of me being and playing rock and roll music, so or playing music really. They wanted me to play the piano or the trombone, but not the bass. So I had to save lunch money and whatever to buy my equipment.
I was kind of that way with the drums. I got those two pieces of the drums, a bass drum and a snare drum, and I would visit. My parents would visit friends' house, and sometimes their kid would have a whole brand new set of drums in the closet. Does he play those drums? Oh, he started out and he decided not to. And I was just so envious of these people who had these drums. I had these two drums with a cymbal, and my father saved money, and I had those drums for a year, and I got a Mount Tom Tom to go. That meant it had 3 drums. And then the next year for Christmas, I got a Florida. So I've literally just got my drums piece by piece over a certain amount of time. I just didn't fall into a brand new set of drums, piece by piece.